I am Katlego. I am a first year PhD student with the Department of Sociology under the Faculty of Humanities. And I'm currently on my first year, and this is my 10th almost year in the university. I've been part of the university for 10 years now, and my research interest is on social movements and mostly focusing on student protest. That is something that I've picked up a lot while I was still a student activist, and I've continued to study in that field because there's a lot of conversation that is currently happening now, and especially being in the 10th year anniversary of the student and fees must fall.
Hi, sir. You just came out of the Thought Leader series talking about sustainable employment. Can you just tell us, from your point of view, what is the role of government in job creation?
From the conversations that we had inside, government is at the center of everything. From what we realized that the university itself, in the Thought Leader series, they highlighted a number of challenges from funding, critical skills that are needed for the current economic development, because we know currently now what we have is a highest unemployment that is currently taking place in the country, and we are trying to find a balance from the university side in terms of bridging the gap, in terms of actually providing the skills that are needed to complement what would our normally Department of Labor say it's our scarce resources. And there are quite a number of challenges because the university are quite struggling in terms of having to sustain some of the students that they take and to be able to produce the necessary skills that the market requires. So one major concern was the funding, which has been actually been kept each and every year. Our government has been slowly keeping the funding that is required for university to produce the kind of candidates that they need. That was one of the second one was putting this university at the center of knowledge production and making sure that whatever is needed can be able to assist government in terms of policy creation or amendments, in terms of making sure that the government itself has qualified and willing people to come and assist with the challenges that the country is having. So the university needs to supply some of these individuals. And how can they do that if the government itself is the one that is actually lacking in terms of also funding? That was another major aspect that was inside, that the funding model that we have currently is not actually helping, because there's a number of discrepancies in the system with regards to NSFAS on how they fund the students that they need to have an economic productivity and students that will contribute to economy when they leave these places. So that was part of the reasons that maybe government should actually look at their funding model, and they should also look at the type of contribution also they are making in terms of assisting universities to have the kind of skills that they require as well. So that's kind of in a nutshell of what I think we need to be considering moving forward to actually have a sustainable, because now we are in the age of AI and so forth. So there's a lot of gaps in terms of the skills that are needed now. And the question the university is asking, are we developing enough incredible skills that can be able to let mostly our youth to compete in the market? And it's not happening. Yes.
Thank you. So you mentioned funding quite a lot. I just want to understand, when you say funding from the government, what are you referring to? Are you talking about NSFAS? Are you talking about funds for the university to run? What are you referring to?
It's a combination of both, because the university has got mainly three funding models. One is the subsidy they get from government, the fees that you get from the students, and the private sector contributions, mostly centered around research and stuff. So first is the same one of the subsidy which they get from government, which is the first one that the government is continually reducing. And that itself, it doesn't seem to be translating into what they need, which is critical skills the type of students that they need, the skills that are needed, the courses that needs to be prioritized, because the universities are struggling having to produce those students because they don't have any money. And if they don't have any money, that then raises a question of sustainability, of how long can the university be able to sustain that. And that's a very important thing that they need to rethink. The second one has to do with the funding of students itself. The NSFAS model that is currently taking place, which has a lot of problems for the current students. In terms of accommodation capping that is currently happening, a lot of students are being deregistered because they are being disqualified by the system. The same system that they have applied through, now we are having an issue of students being just out of the blue, being cut off from funding and stuff. And that is creating a lot of problems from the university, because remember, this funding model has been removed from the university space. This is something that government is doing. NSFAS is the one that is responsible for this. And now the university doesn't really have much role to play in it. So they themselves have to make sure that they have a capable funding model that they can be able to, sustain it. Because it seems like it's not being able to sustain it themselves, because the way it is now, it's having new challenge, whether it's during registrations at the start of the year, which is a huge problem, because we always have to resort to students, complaining about the same things: registration, missing middle, and accommodation and stuff. So they really need to really look at that. And if it's possible, my suggestion would be they need to go back maybe to the loan system that was used, which is one of the suggestions that were made there, to say maybe we should reconsider the way it was before it became a bursary, before it was declared by the then former president, to say, look, we have now what you call a free education, but now it seems like that whole thing is not being able to sustain itself now. And now the students are suffering for it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Now, when you talk about loan system, there are several people, especially black people, who will say that we cannot afford it. We deserve free education. Free education was declared. We need free education, especially coming from previously disadvantaged backgrounds. What would you say to that?
The system itself, from my understanding and the way it was before, it was created in such that because it was open, and I think that's why we should go back to, it's open for everyone to come into the system, to say, okay, fine. If you are financially, disadvantaged, which would be most of the students that are coming through our universities, to say, okay, once you come in and you see that you are academically qualifying and deserving to be in university space, normally what would happen is that you will get absorbed through the years, through your qualification and stuff, and once you finish, or once you graduate, to say, and then normally what will happen is that you'll be asked, or you'll be required to pay a substantial amount back to the NSFAS, back to the loan, so that it can keep sustaining itself, so that the next generation of students can be able to come in, apply, and you contribute now, not only because you also were contributed for by the passing students, now you also have to contribute for the coming in students. So in that way, it used to be able to sustain itself, because currently what is happening now is that this system is not being able to sustain itself, and there's a really small contribution that is being made from the past students who have graduated into the system, to say, okay, fine, I've graduated, what is my contribution then to the next generation of students that are coming? So that is just one of course, there are a lot of factors that are involved in it, but it should be open to such way that itself can be sustained. But with what is currently happening now, this one of saying free for all, something, it's not, seems to be working for everyone. Yeah, that's just my piece of take in it. It's a very complex thing, but that's just my understanding from a student perspective.
And you mentioned that the university is trying hard to bridge the gap, or to ensure that the students it's producing, or the graduates it's producing, have the scarce skills that are needed in the market, that the students your university is producing are able to compete in the environment. What do you think about limiting NSFAS to critical skills instead of every skill? Do you think that would be positive or not?
Yeah, that's a difficult one because when you look at mostly the critical skills are centered around STEM fields, your science and technology and stuff. So, but when you look at, I will make an example of this university. Large majority of our students, I would say that they are not into those fields when you look at the numbers, because I think with this university, the most majority are in the humanities. They are, if not, is education between the two, but I think education is at the first, then humanities. So you have to realize when it comes to engineering, sciences, medicine, it's a very limited number of students that go into that. Also because of it's made in terms of the admission into those faculties, those departments, it's quite high. It's quite, because there's a lot of process involved if you want to get into health sciences and so on. So that itself, I think it's something that they can actually encourage students now to do a lot more, because part of it is that how do we then recenter and encourage students to go into those fields? Because it seems like now, like you said, where the majority of our students are, it's in a place whereby there don't seems to be a lot of funding for that. So I think it won't be much of a difference to say we are prioritizing that, but it should be prioritized in such a way that it attracts students to come and do that. And sometimes it will help if there is a lot of funding available for those STEMs programs that are here, so that students are able to say, okay, fine, if I'm talking about, I know for this what you call normally difficult programs to go in, this easy in terms of funding, then students will be able to incline to go into them. But currently now, it seems like it's a difficulty to get into those, and it's still a difficulty now also to get funding for those ones. But they are also classified as what you call critical skills. So now the question becomes then, how do we then balance the two? Because now if I still qualify for that, is there funding for me? And especially one will think about things like postgraduate funding, which is seems like the more higher you go, the difficulty it gets when it gets to funding, because postgraduate fundings now it's an issue a lot, because for postgraduate research and all of those things it becomes a difficult, because undergrad, I would say, luckily because of the way NSFAS is structured, it covers a lot of students that are undergrad. But what happens then to the postgraduates? That's also another issue that they'll have to reconsider in terms of how they're going to restructure the funding. So I think that maybe that's one of the things that they can try to do in terms of making sure that the funding model is actually accommodating to those STEMs, programs is. So I think also the way we are in terms of culturally also, it contributes a lot, because when students come into the university, it should be able to be made clear to students to say, look, your chances of succeeding or getting employment or having a broader diverse portfolio, it's truth with the STEM sciences, because it seems like with the new age that we are in, we are the fifth industrial revolution. So it will make sense that we have to correlate the two, whereby to say the skills that are needed outside there, can we then prioritize them here, so that when the students leave, it's not a matter of then what are they going to do for employment? They should be able to say, no, because of I've been done this, it's easier for them to go into the job market, easier for them, because that's what is needed out there, not to be producing something that is actually not being able to be useful for students when they they go and leave and graduate out of the university space. Yes.
And just so it's clear, can you just tell everybody, what did you study? Did you do STEM programs or something else?
With my situation, yeah, it was quite different, because I came from college before I came here, and I did STEM. I did mechanical engineering. So when I wanted to further my studies, because in college the system's kind of different, I did the N1, 2, 3 that normally would enated programs. So my situation was just that when I arrived here, because of one of the issues that we are talking about, I received funding very late. And during that registration process, and I arrived, I got here, and I was informed that the program that I wanted to go into, which was physics, by the way, I wanted to do physics because part of mechanical engineering is centered around physics and mathematics, so I wanted to do that. But when I arrived here, and then I was full, it's full because of the number of students that it's a limited space, it's a limited program, so you have to make sure that when you come in as early as possible. So my situation was that it was full, and guess what, it was a matter of because we have funding and we can't turn you away. So what we'll do is that we'll look around other faculties to see where we can find space for you. And I would say by the grace of God, I managed to get space in the humanities, in the sociology department. That is where I started my degree on. Now it was a matter of, okay, now I have to recenter myself to say, although I came here in the morning to introduce sciences, I came out as a humanities student. So yeah, so you can just imagine what would happen normally at home when you come with that type of explanation to say, no, I've changed now. And I've been fortunate because I got into the sociology department from my first year, and I managed to complete my first undergraduate degree. And there were two other modules that I did, which was my major one, English and Sesotho, because of, I was like, no, one thing I'm going to do is languages. For me, it was also important. Because now I'm in the humanities, because at some point I didn't have no idea. Remember, I had no idea what I was going to do in this specific thing. So I just got to love what I was doing with regards to sociology. And I got, acclimatized to it. I enjoyed it. And I loved research. That's one thing I think that made me stay. I loved research. So in terms of doing research, I stayed in it. Then I decided, no, I'm going to do my postgrad in it. I did my honors, my masters, and currently I'm doing my PhD in sociology. And my area of focus then became, because I was a very active student in the university space, being a student activist and so forth, it was easy for me because I got to see a lot of what is happening in the university. So my research interest became, part of what we're talking about, students' struggles. So one of them, that we normally will have student protest on campuses. So that became my area of interest to say, okay, fine, we're always having this student problem. What's the problem? What is happening? And which is currently what I'm doing now. Going into, now that we're in the 10th year anniversary of the Fees Must Fall. So part of it, one being part of it, and then being here 10 years later and still be part of the university space to say, okay, fine, we've been having all of these things, and it's a reflection for me to say, what has changed? What has the student environment become now from the last 10 years when students, are the issues still the same? Are the students still complaining about the same thing? And what has happened with the university space since then? So a lot of that has to do with my research, which is what I'm doing currently now. And one has a long journey ahead of me, quite a few years down the line. But I've been a product of the university, and I'm still going to try and push, hopefully, to finish and make my contribution to the scholarship that is happening there in terms of mostly collective behavior and social movement that are happening in higher education spaces. Yes.
And from what you have done in your research, do you think that the attitude is changing? As you said, 10 years and a 10-year anniversary of the Fees Must Fall. Is a mindset changing, or are most young South Africans still thinking that free this, free that is the way?
I think the attitude is kind of hasn't changed that much because it's difficult for it to change when the issue still remains the same. Because back then, when it was still us in that space, it was the issue of what? Free education. That includes what? Finances. That includes academic exclusion. That includes accommodation fees and being able to afford being in a university space. Now it's even worse with the current state of our economy the way it is, because it's becoming more expensive to get into the universities now. So when students coming into this space, and you still find that we're still having the same problems now, students are still complaining about higher registration fees. We still thought about that. University fees increasing every year, it's still the same issue. Inadequate level of accommodation, it's still the same issue. So it's difficult for the mindset to change, because everyone gets into the system and they're still facing the same problems that we did. Of course, there are a lot of things that are talked about and been done, but there's not really been that radical shift. And never forgetting now that we're still having an issue of now the funding that is supposed to be coming into the university is getting much more less and less. So how are we then how is that supposed to equal to free education and being able to give the universities and other institutions the ability to sustain itself with all of this that is happening. So nothing much has been changing in that area, because it seems like the issues have not changed at all. So that becomes an issue now to say, okay, fine, but has all of that been changed? Because we had the issue of what we call what was pronounced then of free education for all, but that was never the issue, because there was no funding model for that pronouncement to say, okay, fine, if everything is going to be free for university to come in, what's going to happen then? How are we able to sustain this? But we've seen that every year NSFAS is having difficulties in maintaining this. Students are always encountering a lot of financial issues. And it seems like even with them, they make a lot of pronouncements without even to test it through time to see, is this going to work? And that also brings the question of, are they actually including the universities? Because the universities are custodian of the students. But it seems like when they make such decisions, universities are not involved in that conversation. And they'll try impose whatever it is that they do, and only to find out here it doesn't work. Because I can say so, because I've been part of it in both ways. One, when I came into university, it was still the model of saying, no, NSFAS gives the university the money, the university then through its structures, then they will be the one to distribute their money to the students, and it worked like that, and we will not have this many. After then, it was taken off. NSFAS are taken off universities now to be standing alone and to be the one. Of course, now we know what happened with these companies and this subsidiary that they're using to be able to be the ones that are actually allocating funds to students. It's always been an issue. And now the university also sometimes will say, but our hands are tied. We are not the ones that are making these decisions. We are not the ones that are making allocations for them. Why? Because students are now getting directly money from the NSFAS. We are getting money from these companies that they are using to distribute their money. So that also becomes an issue now, you see. So how are we supposed to progress in that type of environment? So that hinders the whole progress that we are all talking about. So there's very minimal changes that is taking place. And I think maybe that's one of the things that we just need to be honest about and be radical to say, no, but this thing is not working. We thought it would, but it's 10 years down the line and we are still talking about the same issue. Then what must happen? Yeah.
So, knowing everything that you know, all the experience that you have, what advice would you give to that grade 10, 11, 12 student who's preparing for university, who doesn't have the funding? How would you ask him or her to prepare himself for the university days?
Yeah, this is a very different environment one. It's unfortunate because not everyone will be able to be in this space. I think that one we have to be realistic of. Not every student, not every learner will be able to be in this space because it's becoming more competitive. And it starts with the disjunction, what I will say, between basic education and higher education. They should be able to produce students or learners that are able to perform when they come here, because this space is very tough. It's very the level is quite high from the higher education, whereby you get our fellow sisters and brothers who comes into this space and they can cope because of the environment, the culture. Half of us and who come from the villages, whereby you have to move from your environment and have to be in a new environment to be able to acclimatize, to be able to succeed in this place. So there's going to be a lot of changes that are happening. But when it comes to funding, which is major issues, because I would like to believe a lot of students will be able to say, I want to go to university, and some will, even worse, they actually qualify to come here, but because of funding, because of the limited resources that are here, you find that it's not possible. And the question becomes, what happens then? So one, I would say, be very diversified. Make sure that if you want to come to this, make sure that you actually want to come to university. I think it's time that we still able to explore other options, because one thing that we live in now, we live in a very globalized society. We live in a technology society. So there are a lot of things to be doing. One, make sure that when you come here, you want to be here. Do not come here. I always say this and I always get back. Do not come here if you are not ready to be in university. And if you are not sure what is it that you want to study. I think that's the first. The second thing, you have to start also, I think, having to consider FETs as well, besides the universities, because one thing that we keep forgetting is that the skills, the courses and the programs that are run by FETs, they are very important, especially now in the age of science and technologies. We have to start considering FETs as viable options. Of course, they themselves have to do the work to make it an attractive space for students to come into, but that's what needs to happen now. Try considering, I started there. I started at the college, I came to university. That's how one would actually go about doing it. But they have to make sure that they try that. And the most difficult one, which is, I don't know, maybe we'll still something that we'll still have to, discuss further and have a discourse on it, to say, because of the limited resources that we are exposed to, then what are we going to do to make sure we sustain ourselves? That's where the business thing comes in, to say, are we having entrepreneurial students when they leave in grade 12, when we leave our high schools? What type of skills are we actually, prepared for? Are we able to, are we prepared to be able to start business? Are we prepared to be able to venture into other things? Because, it's a very limited thing. Not everyone will be singers, sports writers, in arts and all of those things. But because there are people that are gifted in those, can we explore that? Because I can say, for someone who's been in university, you have to make sure you know what you're going to come here to do. I'm saying, do not waste your time coming to university trying to figure out what it is that you're going to be doing. You're going to be frustrated. You're not going to like being here. Because we had friends and people that we came with here, they left when they realized, no, this is not for me. But the question now becomes, was an opportunity for someone who actually wanted to be here, who could have used that opportunities. And most important, to make your journey easy, my suggestion should be focus on the STEM programs. If possible, make sure that the science and technologies, they are your first options, your medicines and everything like that. Because this also seems to be a vacuum when one graduates, because this seems to be what the market is also requiring. So with all that being said, so it's easier now to be saying, okay, at least there's a guarantee that where you're going to end off, there's going to be employment, there's going to be opportunity, or there's going to be at least you being able to establish that yourself. Yes.
Thank you so much. There you've heard it from a PhD student himself. So he said it. He has experience in STEM. He has experience in humanities. He has seen that although the government promises all these free this, free that, free education, they do not always come through. It is your responsibility as a student. It is your responsibility as a parent to ensure that you get those results that will equip you to get those bursaries. And it's not just me. Even humanitarian students are saying, stick to the STEMs, stick to the STEM programs in order to increase your chances of employability and even of business in society. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Katlego. This is Citizen Concerned. And until next time, beware of the comrades.